Hello guys and gals, I'm Guy Gallant, and today we're trying something a little different from my normal videos. I'm going to be doing a SourceFilmmaker tutorial. Today I'm going to be going over how to replicate outdoor sunny lighting within SourceFilmmaker, because that's something that can be quite difficult to do if you don't know what you're doing. So here we've got this scene I set up beforehand. We got Joker here from Persona 5. And this sky card, sky dome that I put in Black Void. Now Black Void doesn't have any lighting. These sky domes and cards aren't affected by map lighting. This tutorial is based off of like the fact that your character isn't being affected by the map lighting, which he isn't here because there is no lighting. So when you have just this character, so we've got the silhouette, we've got to light him. So what do? Most people probably just like, oh my goodness, pressing all the buttons wrong. Oh, just put a light on him. There, that looks good. No. Let's get a light. So most people with that light I just showed, that is what's known as a key light. It is the main light that does most of the does most of the filling, essentially. What we're gonna start with, we're not gonna start with the key light. Most of the time you want to start with the key light, but we're not going to do that for this, just for the sake of this tutorial. So what we're going to do is we're going to recreate ambient lighting. So there are two different kinds of ambient lighting. There are skylights and there are bounce lights. So because SourceFilmmaker is just kind of a bad program, it doesn't have like bounce lights and all that properly in the game, in the program already. So in order to properly make something look realistic, we need to replicate it using lights. So the first thing we need to do is, for skylights, we want to, what we essentially want to do is we want to put blue light all around Joker here. You know, one thing that we don't really notice in our everyday lives is the fact that the sky itself sheds light. In fact, I probably have a picture showing up right now of an object that's just blue, and that's because the sky itself is casting light onto your object. So we want to replicate that in SourceFilmmaker. So we're going to create a new light. What we're going to do is we're going to take our new light, right-click it, and we're going to go down here to Disable Shadows. As you can see in the reference I'm probably putting up in editing, there are no shadows that are being cast by these lights. So we're going to bring down the intensity, and then we're going to drag the red slider. So these sliders all change the color of the light. So why does color red change it to blue? Because all of these are set essentially to like 1. All of these are set to setting 1. And so if you combine red, green, and blue all together, then you get white. And so that's how we get the white light. So essentially we're not increasing the red, we're decreasing the red. And here we also want to decrease the green. Just kind of mess with these settings, kind of get it to match similar to that of the sky, a little darker. Next, we're going to position this light on the corner of our scene. Just kind of imagine as if your scene was a box, if there was a box around your scene. And well, because this is SourceFilmmaker, we don't have to just imagine that. We got a box right here. I just put a box around our character. So we're going to, with our first light here, we're going to first off zoom out. You can do this by scrolling. My scroll wheel is broken, so I just use the settings here. You're going to want to zoom that all the way out just so that it covers all of your surface area. Shadowless light, low intensity, high FOV, and then turn it blue. Now you're going to want to aim it at the upper corner of the box. As you can see, we want it to be relatively dim. We're going to copy and then paste the light. We're going to take this light and we're going to point it at the other corner of the box, and you just want to repeat this process for each corner of the box. I'm going to turn off the box right here. Now we're going to want to look at these lights individually, because what is important here is that all of these lights have the same value when hitting our subject, which is Joker. So we're going to look at just these two compared to each other. So maybe we want to adjust the intensity of each light so that they all look like they're the same intensity. This and you're going to want to change the position and whatnot to better full around your character. This doesn't do like anything. Let's bring this to a better position. And again, like I generally find it better to not actually put a physical box here, but just wanted to put the box there to kind of give a physical representation of where we generally want to be aiming. Once again, adjusting the intensities so that all of the lights are generally the same brightness. We're just going to put all of these into a group. You can create groups by enabling scene hierarchy here in the settings. And you just right click your thing and click group, and it'll put it in a group. You can rename the group, which you're going to rename Sky. Skylights. So now we have those, and now as they're in a group, we can just press this button and it turns off all the lights. Okay, so now that we've got the skylights down, let's move on to the second part of ambient lighting, the bounce lights. Bounce lights, if you didn't know, light bounces. Wow, it's like we learned that in school or something. Light bounces, and it bounces off of objects. I have references probably up right now showing examples of how light bounces around a room, how a single shaft in the ceiling of a room bounces around and doesn't just light the one area that's exposed to light. So we need to replicate that using lights in SourceFilmmaker. So we're going to be using settings very similar to the skylights. We're going to be turning off shadows. We're going to make them real dim. This time we're going to make them a different color. So we want to generally make the bounce light the color in which the surface it's bouncing off of. So in this case, it would be the ground. For this poster, however, there is no definite ground. We don't know what he's standing on. It could be concrete, it could be dirt. For this, we're going to make the lights orange. So we're going to turn down the blue value and we're going to turn down the green value. The reason I chose orange is because orange contrasts well with blue. So it just generally looks good if you use an orange bounce light. So if you're unsure what color you should be using exactly, orange is just a safe bet. For this time, you want to take the box again and just do it exactly like the skylights. You want to turn up the FOV so that's covering your whole subject area. And but this time, instead of the upper corners of the box, you want to choose the lower corners of the box. Now that's a little bright. We're evidently going to turn those down. And again, we want to make sure that all of these values look the same. We want it to be noticeable, but not too bright. And since this is a bright sunny day, we'll keep it a little. We'll probably turn up the skylights a little more as well. All right, and now we have our ambient lighting. So now that we've got our ambient lighting going, we can now move on to the fun stuff. Now this all kind of seems a little complicated at first, but once you get it down, it's real easy. It's just like simple stuff. Now we move on to the key light. I'm going to go ahead and name this key light. So of course, the key light in this situation is going to be the sun. Is wherever the sun is pointing, that's where the key light's going to be. Now, there is no real sun. I mean, there it is, but you can't see it from this camera angle, so there's no definite point where the sun is. So we can put the key light wherever we want. I'm going to put the key light, I generally put it at more of an angle so that the shadows are properly cast across your subject. So we're going to put it generally right there. We're going to bring it a little closer, turn up the FOV, because it's the sun. It's covering everything. So, of course, we want it to cover the whole surface of our character. Now, one thing for SFM, if you're, like, unsure exactly how you want to use your what colors you want to use. Sun, generally a yellowish kind of orange. Bounce lights, again, generally you want to go for, if the ground is not really defined, you want to go for orangish lights, similar to that of dirt, which is brown, but with the bounce lights, as you can see, with just the bounce lights, it looks pretty brown. And then, of course, skylights are going to be blue, and just depending on whether the sky's cloudy or not, you can adjust the color. But a piece of advice is just never use just straight up white lights. And there's only one exception to this piece of advice. But yeah, you always want to put some color in your lights, even if it's barely even noticeable. You don't want to use pure white lights. It doesn't look natural. And of course, here we want to create realistic lighting. So we're just going to make this orangish. We're just going to make it yellowish orange. Another thing we want to do, and something that is important to do, shadow filter size. This is something that I did not learn about for the longest time. This, as you can see, I'm probably pointing them out in editing, but you can see that it's making the shadows more noticeable. We're going to move the light a little bit more, make the shadows a little more noticeable. We're going to turn off those just to show. We want to bring it as close to full value, but bring it down just a little bit under full value, or lowest, or whatever. I don't know. Because if it's the lowest, then the shadows will be janky and they'll be pixely, and we don't want that. That's not realistic of shadows. So turning these lights back on. So now we've got a pretty good looking lighting setup right here. Skylights need to be adjusted a little bit. Now there's still a couple things that we want to do though. So we've got our key light, we've got our ambient light. What else is there? The rest here is all kind of stylized stuff that generally doesn't make sense in real world perspective. So we're going to take another light here, and we're going to use this as a rim light. A rim light, I'm going to probably be showing examples here. Rim lights are just like, just putting a rim on the character. In SourceFilmmaker, rim lights don't really make sense at all. There's no, generally when you want to put lights in your scene, you want to have it to where there's usually an obvious light source that it's coming from. Rim lights don't abide by that rule. They break quite a few rules, actually. But they look good, so we just kind of go with that. Now you can use just regular white lights. So that's one thing that rims, I do at least, that I allow rims to get away with, is using just plain white rims, because any other color just doesn't really look good. And another thing I do, and I've seen some other SFMers do, but this can be tricky to use. So a warning, this is a little trickier to use, but using this setting here, constant attenuation. Setting this up will cause the light to become extraordinarily bright. Why does it do this? Well, as without this setting, as I get further away from the subject here, the light gets darker. Let me show against the wall. So as I get further away, it gets darker. This is fading attenuation. Constant attenuation pretty much creates a constant attenuation with the light. It never fades. It always has the same value no matter how far away it is from the subject. Now, of course, because of the way lights work, it will eventually disappear if you're too far away from your subject. Anyway, so this causes the light to be extremely bright. We're going to want to take shadow filter size. We're going to crank that all the way just so that it doesn't leak over your character, so that it just stays on the shoulders, and you want to generally aim for the shoulders and head of your subject. And generally you want to use 2 rim lights. You want to have one at one back angle like that, and this looks pretty good. Actually, we might not need another one, but generally you also want to have another one at the other back angle. And we can bring them further behind the character to make the rims less noticeable. And so their back is taking the majority of the light, as you can see here. But from this angle, it's just their shoulders, it's just their sides that are showing the light, which is why constant attenuation often works with this. One thing that I also seen a lot of people do with key lights that I forgot to mention, shadow attend. This causes the shadows to be darker. This has made, as you can see, it makes very little difference, and I've almost never used it because there's really just no point in doing this. You can see under his right armpit, or the right side, his armpit, you can see it getting darker there. It's not that, it really isn't worth it that much. I mean, it might make it, help it a little bit, but and you know, this doesn't actually look that great. Like, I made a different setup. Why aren't the lights working? There we go. Here you can see it looks a lot cleaner. That's because I spent a lot more time focusing on different parts of the character. Well, here it's just kind of just a generalization. So definitely, like, fidget with your lights, try to make it more realistic. One thing I did forget, I gotta remember to do this. This is something that you should do for generally more high poly, more realistic models like Joker here. This is what's called subsurface scattering, or SSS for short. So, I mean, everyone's done this as a kid. Like, you shine a flashlight under your hand, your hand gets like all red. I'll have a reference up. But that's subsurface scattering. It's the light going into your hand, scattering inside, and then going back out. So we're going to replicate that within SFM. We're going to be using settings very similar to bounce lights or skylights. Disable shadows, make it very dim. This time we're actually going to lower the FOV, and we're going to make it red, because that you know, because of the reference. Like that's just what it is. So we want to generally make it red. We don't want it to be very bright, but what we're going to do is we're going to point it at the parts of his skin. Because he's outside, there's a lot of light going into his skin, bouncing around, and then coming back out. So we want to replicate that through subsurface scattering. So here, it's a little red. Here's a little technique that is really helpful. This setting here, radius. Now, most people, when they just try this out, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't look like it does anything. And that's because the effects of radius, it does not apply the effects of radius in the motion editor or the graph editor. It will only apply the effects of radius in the clip editor. So if we set radius really high and then we go into the clip editor, you can see it did something, you know. And what does it do? Essentially, what radius does is it causes the light to cover a larger radius. And the only way I've thought to explain this is that it takes the particles in the light and spreads it across a larger surface. This will cause the light to be dimmer, but it will cover a larger surface. And it will also attempt to replicate a wrapping effect around Joker's head, which is what we need. We want the light to go. We want to light, you know, his whole face. So we're going to turn up radius. We're not going to want it that high, but as you can see, it had its effect. We want to maybe turn up that. And so now it's a nice, and you know, because it's spread out more, it's also a lot softer. So it's not as harsh. And we can also do that with the skylights. We can put radius on the skylights as well. I've honestly found very little difference when doing so, but it can help. It's just a very small thing that you can do to make your lighting more accurate. And yeah, I think that covers how to do basic lighting for your character. So yeah, definitely like fidget with the lights. It's a learning process, definitely. It'll take some getting used to, but and if just don't rush it like I did here. It doesn't look that great because I rushed it. Because I just wanted to show an example. Well, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you did find this helpful. If this is this is something new I'm trying, so I don't know if you guys like this. Normally I do like comedy stuff on this channel, so I don't know what you guys think of tutorials. But if you guys are interested, let me know. Like if you want more tutorial stuff like this, because I'm just trying new things at this point. Anyway, that'll do it for this video. I want to thank you for making it this far. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and I'll see you guys on the flip side.